The Pod in the Barrier by Theodore Sturgeon. Originally published in the September 1957 issue of Galaxy magazine, which republished it in their French version in November of the same year. It appeared in a French anthology in 1977 and in 4 collections of the author's stories. A Touch of Strange in 1958, an Italian one in 1964, Starshine in 1966, and Now the News in 2003. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. The Pod in the Barrier. A lousy mission. Of course, it was a volunteer, i.e. suicide, mission, and for that you take what comes. They may wine you and dine you and honor you and your tribe for 3 generations coming and going in the days before you start. But once you're on your way, you can't expect it to be a pleasure. Everything about suicide is death, not just the final part. Potter picked his cuticles and didn't know he was doing it, even while he was looking you straight in the eye, talking to you at the time. Try shipping out with that. That's what bothered me the most, anyway. Most of the others seemed to be bugged by Donato. He had a psychosomatic cough that passed all the pre-flight medics for the simple reason that he had never had such a thing before, probably because he had never gone out to die before. Me, I guess I have soaked up enough of that profound compassion of the Luane to defend me against that kind of annoyance. But Potter the Picker now, that got to me, I admit it. Little Donato was always trying to please. Some people are annoying because once in a while they just don't go out of their way to make things a little happier for anyone else. Donato hit the other extreme, always making way, never disagreeing, forever finding some way to help or get a cushion or move back or bring or say or not say whatever anyone else might want, until you wanted to scuttle the ship just so it would take him with the lot of you. The main trouble was, he was so helpful he never gave you anything to complain about. Time after time I would see one or the other of the crew suddenly wheel on him out of a dead silence and roar at him to get the hell out. "Why, sure, friend," Donato would always say, and smile, and get the hell out, leaving whoever it was beating himself on the temples. Potter was a specialist in field mechanics, and Donato was a top ballistics man. England was an ugly man with big ears and wet eyes who kept to himself pretty much, only he ate loud. He was an expert in missile control, and I'm Palmer. I heard there was a man in Alpha Sigma 4 once who knew more about transspatial stress than I do, but I don't believe it. The 4 of us had 4 different ideas for breaking the Luane barrier, and that's what we were on our way to do. All 4 ideas were pretty far-fetched, and the odds were much in favor of the barriers getting us, but it had to be done. After everything reasonable has been tried on something that must be done but can't be done, you have to start calling in the crackpots. I had to bring along my perfectly valid theories with the 3 crackpots because it was the only way they would ever get tried. And that was the expedition personnel. The others were just operations. A skipper, Captain Steve, strictly ferryboat, who knew everything he had to know about running the ship and getting her there, and didn't know, didn't care, wouldn't talk about anything else. Some of the others griped about the kind of skipper we had, but not me. He had to be expendable, and he was. He had to know his job, and he did. So, the utility monkey was funny for about half an hour of anybody's time, and forever after that just unpleasant to have around. He was sort of misshapen, with a head much too big for his body and a left leg with too much bounce in it. It's been so many hundreds of years, I guess, since anyone had anything drastic wrong physically that nobody can get used to it anymore. You know how to be polite about it when you do encounter it, and back home you know how to forget you saw it pretty thoroughly. But on a space can, you never get the chance. Personally, I think we should have shipped without a utility man. I don't know if I feel so strongly about it that I'd have done the dirty work on the ship myself, but maybe one of the others would. I don't care how much humanity progresses. There is always a little room somewhere for the unskilled hand, lifting and mopping and cleaning out the sewer lines when something gets stuck. This monkey we had went by the name of Nils Bloom, and nobody paid much attention to him. And then we had the unemployed CG. Did you ever hear of an unemployed cruise girl on a ship? I don't mean kicking around the spaceports, waiting to ship out, unemployed that way. I mean right there aboard. She had nothing to do. Crew girls, as a whole, are a dowdy bunch. There's no point in putting cute clothes, cute tricks, and heady perfume aboard a space can. You don't need to stimulate anything. That takes care of itself as time goes by. They keep themselves clean and wait around till they're needed. They're a thick-skinned, slow-witted lot because there's no sense and sensitivity in their line. It just makes trouble. This Virginia we shipped, she came from the bottom of the underside of the sump. She was everything that distinguishes a CG from a real Earthside female woman. She had a wide face that was closed and bland as a bank vault door on the Sabbath, and a build that was neither this nor that, but sort of statistically there. With a normal personality, or none at all, she might have had a job to do and would have done it. But with the personality she had, well, at first you just didn't like her, and after a while you couldn't abide her, and finally you got the feeling about her that she was a lower animal, that you couldn't stand what the others might think of you if you went near her. There was a lot of difference of opinion aboard on a lot of subjects, but not on that one. So that's what we had, believe it or not, an unemployed CG. I read someplace about an Arctic explorer back in the days where the poles of old Earth were covered with ice. He used to bring along the ugliest woman he could find to cook. Her other function was to inform him when he'd been away from civilization too long, which she did by beginning to look good to him. Well, maybe, given time enough, we'd have found something for this Virginia to do, but given that much time, we'd all be dead. Oh, she was a great help aboard, Virginia was. That personality. I thought a lot about that personality of hers, just because on a long haul you have time to think a lot about everything. I knew a kid in school who had a face so insulting, so all-fired arrogant when it was relaxed, that the teachers used to throw him out of the class just for sitting there, at least until they learned it was only physical and had him remodeled. Well, maybe Virginia's personality was something like that. Maybe she couldn't help it. She had a way of carrying a cloud of what Potter once called retroactive doubt. When she was anywhere near you, you breathed it. You'd say something, and she would repeat it, and by the way she did it, I can't describe it at all, but I'm telling you the truth. By the way she did it, she made whatever you'd said into a falsehood. Sometimes it suddenly sounded like a lie, and sometimes like a mistake, and sometimes like something you could be expected to believe because you were ignorant. I mean, just repeating your own words. You'd say, "Back home, I've got a silver-headed walking stick." And she'd say, "Yeah, you've got a silver-headed walking stick," in that dull, flat drone of hers, and by damn, you'd find yourself arguing with her that you did have one. I mean, fighting, defending yourself, the way you only can when you doubt something yourself. Then she'd go away, and you'd sit and stew about the walking stick, wondering where it was you last saw it, wondering if you actually did have it anymore, if the head of it was real silver. It didn't have to be something that was important at all. She could make you feel that way. When it was important, shipmate, better not mention it around her. I think you could tell her your name and she'd make you doubt it. As a matter of fact, now I think of it, she did just that to me the day I first saw her, which is traditionally the day after upship. I walked up to her in the mess hall and said, "My name's Palmer." And she looked at me without blinking and said flatly, "Your name's Palmer," and made me say, before I could stop myself, "No, really, it is," and then skulk off feeling damn strange. We'd taken off with a no-grav tug and slipped into second-order matrix within 6 hours, all very fast and painless thanks to the Luanae. Both devices were theirs, and so was the ship's power plant, and so was the sub-etheric communication we could get loud and clear for almost 4 full days after upship. Do you know how far that would be in miles? Here, figure it out. 4 days is enough to take you halfway to Sirius, and that's a powerful long reach for a communicator phasing out of normal space and finding your receiver. I recall especially that 4th day's bulletins, because we all gathered around to soak them up and chew them thoroughly. We knew that we'd hear nothing else from Earthworlds from there on for the 6 ship weeks it took us to get out to the Luanae barrier, way out on the other side of the coal sack. We cheered the wiffle ball scores and the chess results and laughed too loud at the human interest bit about the kid who brought the Nova Mars stink dog into school. And then there was the last real news we heard, that Chicago had been frozen from northern Ontario Parish, clear south to the Joplin city limits, back on old Earth. Everybody tisk-tisked. "Well," said Potter, looking at his finger, "I guess there's no other way." "But people always get killed in a freeze," said big-eared England. "More people get killed in a riot," I remember saying. About then, the signal faded, very abruptly, as it does when you get out of range in subspace, and we all sat around worrying a bit. It was funny, that news of all news being the last we heard. It was like a nudge, a send-off, a reminder. Old Earth wasn't the only place where there were riots, not by a sight. Of 18 planets in the 2 so-called Earth galaxies, only Ragnarok and Luna Luna were not bulging at the seams, and they'd be as bad as the others in a generation. By and large, people behaved themselves, but there were so many of them. The law of averages dictated that in that number there had to be so many troublemakers. There were bound to be so many riots, and there had to be more troublemakers and riots all the time. Unless we broke the Luanae barrier. We owe the Luanae a lot. As I said before, a good deal of our most advanced technology is built on transmissions from the Luanae, a very old people, ancient before Old Sol the First was a sun, wise and compassionate. That was the real cliché, the compassionate Luanae. True enough, though. No one had ever seen them, of course. The barrier took care of that. No one understood the exact method of their transmissions, though they tried their best to explain. You'd get in range, and then there it was. They were talking to you inside your head. What they said was true. That you could bank on, swear by, hang your hat or your life on. Some things have to be proved, but not anything the Luanae said. You might not believe it if you heard about something they said, from me, say, but go hear it from them. You'll know it's so. Never in the 300 years of contact had anything they said turned out to be anything but exactly, really exactly so. They say that at first humanity took it with a dose of salts. We are a suspicious species, but although the Luanae couldn't give us the specs of a machine like theirs, they insisted that their thought transmitter was only a machine. They were able to describe an odd little recorder that would play back and sound like the original. When a few million of those had been made and distributed, there wasn't any suspicion anymore. It just blew away. But population pressure rioting isn't as easy to dispose of as inbred suspicion. Put enough people in a limited area and you'll have trouble. Put too much in the same area and look out. Now we had 16 worlds with too much humanity and 2 more with almost enough to start trouble. And all we could do was watch and feel and freeze whole sections when the thing boiled over. And after each freeze, the United Planet men would spread through the countryside, picking up the mangled corpses from ground cars and aircraft which had smashed up when everyone blacked out, and making the millions of others comfortable where they lay. They'd wake up in due course, with no sense of time passed, but the dead would have been long buried, and the troublemakers located and treated, and the immediate causes of the riot, whatever they might be, it didn't take much, adjudicated and put right. It was generally suspected that the UP boys declared riot and froze sections on somewhat less excuse than they really needed, but most people didn't object. At least it kept a few million people each time from breeding any more for 6 to 8 months, but nobody denied that this was pure stopgap. As to halting reproduction altogether for a while, the suggestion came up monotonously in the council sessions and was as monotonously knocked down. Enforced sterility is counter to the most basic of civil rights, and the Earth worlds would die before they would relinquish any basic right. They were dying, too. And there, hanging just out of reach, were the Luanae Earths, 8 fine Earth-type planets circling 3 suns in Galaxy 3. 8 beautiful worlds, ready and waiting. We wanted them, and the Luanae wanted us to have them, and all we could do was watch them swing by and feel wistful because of the barrier. The Luanae are not terrestrial. As far as can be understood, they have a boron metabolism and compete in no way with us hydrocarbon types. They need nothing from us and wouldn't take it if they did need it. When they say they have those worlds to give us, when they say the worlds are suitable, and they say for sure that those are the only planets left in this entire quadrant of the universe, why, you can bet on it. They're the ones who found Luna Luna and Ragnarok for us when the Earth worlds had despaired of ever finding another terrestrial planet. We also have their assurance that in the other quadrants are literally thousands of terrestrial planets, but we will need a totally new technology to reach them, and that will take us maybe 4 centuries to acquire, even with their help. Well, the Earth worlds wouldn't last 4 centuries without the Luanae planets. With them, though, it might be done. All we had to do was reach them. All we had to do was penetrate the barrier. The barrier was a sphere in space. Not a thing, exactly, just a place which could be represented on a cosmimap as a sphere. It was a fair-sized sphere. It englobed a third of the Luanae galaxy, including, of course, the 3 little Luanae home planets and the 8 lovely unreachable Luanae Earths. All it did, that barrier, was to draw a line. Anything outside of it was left strictly alone. Anything penetrating it was instantly tracked, hunted, and smashed by Luanae missiles. And anything that got cute enough to duck inside and out again was destroyed by the barrier itself, which had the simple ability of reversing the terrene sign of a random third of the atoms in any matter it touched. You can imagine what happened to anything from a micrometeorite to a sun that got exposed to it, shot through and through with contraterrene matter, disappeared in a single ferocious flash. The Luanae galaxy was discovered 300 years ago by a creaky old Earth survey ship powered by Tellerformula atomics and a primitive subspace drive, which barely quadrupled effective light velocity. The first thing the ship It was called the Luanae after its skipper's wife and daughter, both of whom were named Luana. The first thing they saw was the Luanae galaxy, a long, narrow, elliptical one with a dark band, the perfect arc of a circle, a third of the way down the long axis. It looked artificial, so they hobbled over there to investigate. It was artificial, all right. It was the barrier, or rather the segment of space through which the barrier had removed all impinging matter. And when they got within a dozen light years of it, they were in range of the beings who came to be known by the same name as the ship and the galaxy, the Luanae. They said, "Stop." They said it simultaneously inside the heads of everyone aboard. They said it with that encasement of utter truth and total believability. They said it, they told us later, with an automatic machine set up eons ago to warn away any intelligent life from their barrier. But when the ship Luanae responded by stopping, it wasn't any machine that spoke next. The strange creatures set up a welcome, such a warm, admiring, congratulatory flood of thought that they say all hands looked at each other in amazement and started to weep. And along with the welcome, a warning. Don't come any closer. They threw a few million cubic meters of rubble up from the inside of the barrier and let the astonished crew watch the near margins of the invisible barrier light up with a hellish 3-hour show of destruction. They urged experiment, suggesting that the survey ship throw something at the barrier. The ship did. Whatever matter penetrated was overtaken and destroyed by what appeared to be tiny hunting missiles. Whatever matter was angled through the barrier's skin so that it would cut a cord and emerge again, splashed into flame as it left. The men on the ship knew, down to the marrow, that they were welcome, thirstily, ardently welcome. And they knew that they were warned. The ship hung outside the barrier for over a year, setting down what turned out to be the greatest treasure ever brought home by a vessel since time began. Knowledge. The knowledge that put cold fusion power plants on all the Earth, planets, and all the factories. New designs, new principles of mathematics and spatial mechanics, new methods, new ideas, much of it material Earth possibly might have discovered for itself in 1,000 years, most of it material we never could have found unaided. And every bit of it was valid. Every bit of it held out the promise of more once we had assimilated this incredible cargo. When the survey ship Luanae reached the Earth worlds, they say that the suspicion was thicker than anyone alive today could readily understand. They say they were going to court-martial the skipper for wasting all that time out there making up stories. And they say there was a powerful movement to suppress everything they brought back, out of fear that the new technology might in some way be a Trojan horse. But sheer cussed human curiosity got the better of all that, and though they started slowly, it wasn't too long before the Luanae devices and principles proved themselves out spectacularly. And in a few years, humanity was back again, in force. The main idea was to breach the barrier, peaceably if possible, but breach it. Most of the ships, most of the men did not make the attempt, so great was the impact of the Luanae truth and fellow feeling. Some did try, though, ramming, bombing, bringing up hypermagnetic generator ships to try warping the intangible structure of the barrier. All failed. Those who touched it died. Whenever that happened, there was a great soundless cry of mourning from the Luanae, but the barrier remained. When the survey ship discovered them, the Luanae had explained simply and clearly why the barrier was there and why it stayed. It seemed too simple a story, and buried as it was in such a mass of other data, it was overlooked or disbelieved. Mind you, that was before the Luanae had been recorded, before the human millions could hear for themselves what a transmission from them was really like. Probably the Luanae realized this. At any rate, the story of the barrier was the first Luanae recording to be widely distributed, and its impact was huge. Such a simple story. A people in some ways like humanity, perhaps a little swifter technologically, perhaps in some ways less demanding. Well, they lived a good deal longer, took a good deal less from the land to keep themselves alive. They had some things to be proud of, an art that can only be imagined outside the barrier, and music of a kind. They did send some of their literature, as you know. Then they had a number of things to be ashamed of. Some wars, big ones. 3 times they all but destroyed themselves and climbed back up again. Then there was a long flowering, which seemed like something good, something fine. They developed a compassion, a philosophy of respect for the living and harmony with the laws of the universe. More than a religion, more than simply a way of life and thought. Through it, a good many things became unnecessary to them, and they forgot they had hands. When they were attacked from space, this happened countless thousands of years ago, they could not defend themselves at all. They had forgotten the largest part of their fabulous technology. Their machines were corroded, their skills had died, and worst of all, they had forgotten how to organize, how to be many men under one man's hand for the duration. So they were enslaved. They broke their chains at length, at some 30,000 years' length. When they had driven out the invader and followed him and destroyed him and all his worlds, they were a frightened and sobered people. Their taste of quiet, of personal and individual fulfillment was a touch of paradise to them, and they deeply resented its loss. Their return to material power was, in their minds, a descent and a degradation. Yet they had learned a lesson and learned it well. They made up their minds to defend themselves in such a way that never again, positively, absolutely, and forever, never again would they be attacked, no matter how long it might be, no matter how deep and distantly they buried their souls in their nameless, nebulous delights. So, after due consideration, they decided on the barrier. They threw their total productivity, enormous after their last war, and all their ingenuity into a defense to end all defenses. They marked out a segment of the surrounding space, purposely enclosing 10 times the volume which their computers specified as the most that they could conceivably ever need for themselves. They built a planetoid and stabilized it in an orbit around a dead sun not far from their cultural hub. This control planetoid, in ways as yet far too advanced for humanity to grasp, generated and maintained the barrier itself. In addition, it gathered up cosmic debris and sucked it in, and with its mammoth automatic machinery, transmuted and smelted and cast and machined flight after flight of missiles, large and small. These were racked and stored by the hundreds of thousands, stationed throughout the barrier-protected space in a myriad of automatically computed orbits. And so it was that anything which penetrated the barrier from any quarter was instantly hunted down and killed. There was some alarm at first over the fact that the barrier, by its nature, must destroy anything leaving, as the missiles destroyed everything entering. But there seemed no valid answer to the question, why not? The Luanae weren't going anywhere. They had space enough, and 10 times space enough, for any roaming they chose to do, and they chose to do very little, for their own orientation was back toward those golden years of introspection, of contemplative inward self-realization, and their hunger for it was very great. And so they locked the universe out, and themselves in, and threw away the key. The control planetoid was a machine, automatic, self-repairing, powered by cold fusion of two isotopes of hydrogen, and it could always get hydrogen. It made missiles and used them. When it used them, it gathered up the dust that was left and salvaged it and made more. When any outbound matter was destroyed by the inner surface of the barrier, it gathered up the radiant energy of the pyre and the ashes and brought them in and used them. It was impregnable, inexhaustible, tireless, and immortal. It brought safety. It brought peace. It brought death to a nomad people, so vastly superior in intellect and in what has been translated from the Luanae sendings as size of soul, that the Luanae, by that time steeped again in their unthinkable metaphysics, awoke to watch them approach, awestruck, alive, and aware of them. What they were can never now be known. Even the Luanae do not know. They say only that their 30,000 years of slavery to the creatures who invaded them was but a scratch, a toe stub, compared to the wound they suffered in the realization that they caused the destruction of these nameless nomads. The creatures swept down on the barrier, unable to detect something unique in the universe, unwarned and unprepared, and were swallowed up by it. It is impossible to describe the impact of this event on the Luanae, already deeply involved in their ancient philosophy, in tune with the universe and respecting all natural things, compassionate, life-reverent, humble, and kind. They watched the destruction of their infinite superiors with an infinite horror. They realized then the extent of their folly, their crime in the creation of the barrier. Already far gone away from their technological peak, they again restored it. They surpassed it. They mobilized to pull down what they had put up, driven by guilt and horror at the thing they had done. It was the crucifixion of crucifixions, the murder of murders, with the Messiah of Messiahs, their irreplaceable victim. And they failed. They had built too well. The planetoid destroyed everything that approached it. It was surrounded by miniature versions of the Great Barrier, some turned inside out so that the disintegrating surface was encountered first. It picked apart, in a microsecond, everything they threw at it, ate it, digested it, and was nourished. The Luanae then undertook a frightening sacrifice, an appalling expense. In an effort to overload the planetoid's defenses, they flung up thousands of missiles, ships, lumps of rock and debris, hurling it every which way between their stars and planets. Implacably, the planetoid located the intrusive matter, compared it with its matrix of stored information on allowable bodies and their permitted circlings, and sought out and destroyed the offending ones, quite uncaring that many of them, tragically many, were manned. And in time the Luanae discovered that the planetoid was producing missiles and energy past its original capacity, consuming more than it had originally been designed to handle, computing more things more quickly. At that, they ceased to attack it, realizing belatedly that they had forced it to enlarge and strengthen itself, the only course open to a self-repairing machine stressed beyond its original endurance. They fell back, then, on the only thing left for them to do as creatures of efficient conscience. They sent out warnings. They devised transmissions which covered the entire spectra of intelligence, transcending language, surpassing even symbolism. They set up automatic beacons to radiate the warning in all directions, each beam overlapping the next. Bitterly, they organized a trade of monitors to watch over the automatic machines, which they never again would trust. The monitors were ritualized like a priesthood, drilled like slave legions, marinated in the impulses of duty. Once that was done and tested past any conceivable fault or failure, they settled to a new level of life, neither blindly mechanical like that which had produced the planetoid, nor vegetative and contemplative like that which had left them open to slavery, but a middle ground based on the ancient convictions of respect for life and its ways in the rigid and marvelous frame of the universe, and implemented it by an unrusting technology. So it was that the Luanae were at last in a position to make their greatest and most mature discovery, a thing known to each of them as individuals, but until now unrealized in terms of life groups. A man cannot exist alone. He must be a member of something, a piece, an integer of some larger whole. Men plus men make cities, which band together to form states, then countries, then worlds, and never can a sole unit exist alone and unsupplied. Communication and intercourse are necessary and vital. Without them, the lone unit is a brief accident unnoticed by the universe and forever forgotten. So, behind their gigantic, ghastly barricade, the Luanae at last acknowledged membership in a grouping greater than species, and declared themselves belonging to life and dedicated to the survival of its total membership. This, then, was the self-imprisoned people discovered by an Earth scout ship in the business of locating terrestrial planets for humanity. The Luanae rose with a shout at the sight of them. This was life, life to aid and life to share. For until Earth came to them, they saw themselves dying like a surrounded city, like a lone traveler, like an amputated limb, like any other life separated from its sustaining body. Earth brought life to the Luanae, and the Luanae enlisted themselves in Earth's search for life. A lousy trip, a suicide trip, with a skipper and utility monkey horse-blindered by their duties, 3 crackpots, and an unemployed and unusable CG, and me, Palmer, with what could be the answer. I had faith in my solution. I liked its math. I had little or no hope that it would be tried, really tried, full scale, and done right. People don't know enough. They don't think really straight. They turn the wrong valves and push the wrong buttons. Palmer should have 1,000 hands and the ability to be simultaneously in 1,000 places. Then this business of being the wasp waste in the history of life and the lives of the 2 cultures, this would make more sense. I shall be bungled out of history, I told myself as we ground along in the nothingness of subspace. The Luanae subspace, given us by Luanae cold fusion generators. I'm coming, I told the Luanae silently, but I bring the enemy. I bring bungling. And my marvels, you'll succumb to stupidity as will I, for it's the last and strongest enemy of them all, against which you and I might not prevail. I watched Potter picking away at his cuticles, and I silently bore Donato's cough, and I gave my approval to big-eared England because he had so little to say to anybody. I tried to remember what exactly it was that made Nils Bloom, the utility monkey, funny to me when I saw him first. I hoped to recapture it and laugh again, but I never made it. I swore sometimes at Donato's eternal helpfulness, and I ignored the skipper, because who wants to talk all the screaming time about ship's business and the business of ships gone by? I said nothing where the CG could hear me, and tightened up in painful empathy when I saw one or another of the ship's company floundering and defending and doubting when she repeated his words. I did nothing about any of these annoyances, except maybe the time I suggested to the skipper that he feed the CG at times other than our mess, so I wouldn't have to witness her purposeless wreckage of even the little things men believe in. He bought that, and it had a double advantage. We not only were spared the sight of her at meals, but she took to spending her time aft in the monkey's cage, among the mops and drums of cleaning aerosol and sewer-line scrapers. If Nils Bloom objected, then, monkey-like, he could pass it off by scratching and chewing a straw. I came through there once and saw them sitting across from each other at Bloom's little table, elbows almost touching, not speaking and not looking at each other. And by the Lord, she was crying, and I must say it did me good. I had a mind to go ask the monkey how he managed it, but I don't involve myself with the unskilled. We got where we were going and snapped out of the nothing into the something. We took a bearing on the Luana galaxy, and it was quite a sight. A long, irregular sausage of an island galaxy with its unmistakable signpost, the long, regular black swatch of the barrier's edge where it impinged on and shut out the rest of the bodies in the formation. We ducked under again for half an hour and came up again too close to see the swatch, but close enough at last to get the Luana greeting. That I can't tell you about. Captain Steve piped us all into the mess hall in mid-morning, which would have annoyed me if I could think of anything I'd rather be doing. But there just wasn't anything to do, or to want to do instead. So I shuffled in with the rest of them, Potter, England, Donato. Bloom and the CG were back with the mops, I imagine. The captain let us all be seated and stood at the end of the table and knocked on a coffee mug self-consciously. He said, "We have arrived at our site of operations. We have, among the four of you, 4 different specialists with, as I understand it, 4 attacks on the problem of penetrating the Luana barrier. I need not," he says, and then went right on as if he needed to anyway, "need not tell you of the vital importance of this task. The entire history of humanity does depend on it. If you or men like you fail to solve this problem soon, we can expect our entire civilization to explode like a dying sun through the internal pressures of its own contracting mass." He coughed to cover up the floridity of his phrasing, and little Donato happily joined in. I saw one of England's wide, flat hands move on the table to cover the other and hold it down. "Now then," said the captain. He bent from the waist and removed his hand from his side pocket. In it was a sleek little remote mic. "This is for the record, gentlemen. You first, Mr. Palmer." "Me first what?" I wanted to know. "Your plan, sir. Your approach, attack, whatever it pleases you to call it. Your protected method of cracking the barrier." I looked around at what passed for an audience, coughing, picking, glowering wetly. I said, "In the first place, my plan has been fully detailed and filed with the proper authorities, men who are in a position to understand my specialty. I believe that copies of these papers are on file with you. I suggest that you look at them and save us both the trouble." "I'm afraid you don't understand," said the captain, looking flustered. He gestured at the mic. "This is for the record. I've got to have the oral rundown. It's, for the record." "Then I say to the recording, for the record," I barked right into the mic, "that I am not accustomed to being asked to make speeches before a lay audience, which cannot be expected to understand 1 word in 10 of what I have to say. And I refer the recording and its auditors, whoever they may be, to the files in which my detailed report is presented, for proof not only of my project, but of the fact that these assembled, and no doubt those listening to this record, would in all likelihood not know what I was talking about. Not at all." I glared up at the skipper. "Does that satisfy the record, Lieutenant?" "Captain," corrected the captain mildly. "Really." "A mistake," I allowed. "I never make mistakes accidentally, you understand." I waved at the mic. "Let's let the record stand with that. Do you mind?" "Mr. Potter," said the captain, and I leaned back, pleased with myself. Potter removed his finger and immediately replaced it. "Well, I don't mind telling you mine," he said adenoidally. "I'm in field mechanics, as you know. I have made certain calculations which indicate that the stresses present in the barrier skin are subject on momentary distortion under the stress of shell area. high-intensity focused magnetic fields of about 100 billion Gauss per square centimeter at focus. That's billion, he amended, not billion. I wondered how the record would make out the difference. "Very good, Mr. Potter," said the captain. "Unless I am mistaken, you propose to breach the barrier momentarily with a high-intensity focused magnetic field. Is that correct?" Potter nodded, a gesture which carried through his right wrist. "Very well," said the captain. I blew disgustedly through my nostrils, looking at Potter. His business was as disgusting as his hobby of picking at his cuticles. If I knew as little about my specialty as he did about his, I'd never get trapped into talking about it. "Mr. Donato?" "Yes, Captain Steve? Yes, sir," Donato cried, all blushes and eagerness. "Well, sir, I'm in ballistics. What I propose is a two-part missile aimed to graze the barrier in such a way that, at the moment of contact, it separates, one segment glancing back outside, the other entering and proceeding inward. This is on the theory that, although the control planetoid reacts instantaneously, its sensors report only one event at one locality at a given moment. I feel I have a 50-50 chance, then, of slipping one part through while the other part is being reported grazed and gone. I think a minimum of 130 shots, fired in 4 groups and at 4 slightly different approach angles, would establish whether or not the theory is tenable." "Tenable?" I gasped. "Why, you nincompoop!" That's the first time in my entire life I ever called anyone that, but as I looked at him, blushing and grinning and wanting to do right, there just wasn't another applicable term. "What makes you think, Mr. England?" said the skipper, much louder than I've ever heard him speak before. I confess I was startled. Before I could quite recover myself, England answered. "In the area of Miss," he said, in a whispery voice which at that point failed him. He swallowed with all his might and then made a weak, flickery smile. "In the field of missiles, my chief concern is first a series of tests to determine the exact nature of the internal control pulses in the hunting missiles, the frequency and wave height of the command pulses in the guided missiles, with a view to jamming or redirecting them. Second, I plan to lob some solids through the barrier at low velocities in order to study the metallurgical content of the missiles with a view to the design of sensing dodging equipment and possibly some type of repulsion field designed to force the missiles into a near miss." "Very succinct," said the captain, and I wondered how he knew what was succinct or not about a specialty. "Now that we've got the swing of this little discussion, perhaps, Mr. Palmer, you would like to reconsider and join it." "Perhaps I would at that," I said, stopping to think it over. After all, a little sense ought to be added to this exhibition of maundering incompetence, if only for balance. "Then, if you must know," I said, "the only tenable method of approaching the problem lies in the area of explosive stress. No one but myself seems to have noticed the almost perfectly spherical shape of the barrier. A sphere in any flexing material is a certain indication of some dynamic tension, a container and the contained in equilibrium, with the analog of some fluid differential like the air inside and outside an inflated balloon. You don't follow me." "Go on," said the captain, holding his head as if he was listening. "Why, all it would take is a toroidal mass equipped with a subspace generator and an alternator. If this is placed upon the barrier margin and caused to vibrate into and out of the subspace state, there will be a portion of the barrier, that which is surrounded by the toroid, which will be included in the vibration. The effect then is in causing a circular section of the barrier to be in non-existence for part of the time. It is my conclusion that this small breach will cause the barrier to collapse like that toy balloon I mentioned. QED, Lieutenant. I leaned back. Captain, said the captain, tiredly. Then he looked me in the eye and said, I regret to inform you, Mr. Palmer, that you are completely wrong. Bloom, he bellowed suddenly. Coffee out here. Ha! Came the monkey's voice. It was as near as he ever let himself get to aye, sir. He must have had the tray ready before the skipper called, because he came out with it loaded and steaming. He set it down in the middle of the table and retired to a corner. At the side of my eye, I saw the CG sidle out of the cage and go to stand silently beside him. But I wasn't in a mood for anything but this preposterous allegation from the captain. I got to my feet so I could look down at him. Did I understand you to say, I ground out, cold as Neptune, that in your opinion I am wrong? Quite wrong. The barrier is a position, an infinite locus, not a material substance, and is therefore not subject to the laws and treatments of matter per se. I have been known to splutter when I'm angry, unless I try not to. I found myself trying very hard not to. I have reduced every observation on that surface known to man, I informed him, to mathematical symbology, and from it have written a consecutive sequence of occasions which proves beyond doubt that the surface is as I say, and will act as I say. You seem to forget that this is on the record, Admiral, and this may mean you are making a permanent rather than a temporary fool of yourself. I sat down, feeling better. Captain, said the captain wearily. He turned and took a paper from the stack of folders which I noticed for the first time lay there. He flashed it. At first glance it looked like a page of figures over which a child superimposed a crude and scratchy picture of a Christmas tree in red. He said, Equation number 132, 4 pi sigma over theta plus the square root of 4 pi sigma quantity squared. I could not help noticing that, as he reeled it off, he was waving the paper, not reading from it. I said, I recognize the equation. Well, nothing, snapped the captain. Unwell, I'd call it. Heh. He slid the sheet over to me. If you will observe, to be consistent with the preceding series, the integer sigma is not whole but factorial, in view of which an increasing error is introduced wherein. But see for yourself. I looked. What resembled a crude picture of a Christmas tree was the correction, in red, of the symbol he had mentioned, and the scrawled figures of 3 corrected factors in the next equation, and 7 in the third following, until the red marks became a whole line. I said, Might I ask who has had the effrontery to scribble all over these calculations? Oh, I did, said the captain. I thought it might be a good idea to rework the whole series, just in case, and I'm glad I did. You ought to be too. I looked again at the sheet and swallowed sand. A man has to major for a considerable time in some highly creative math to be able to do what had been done here. A thing or two came to my lips, but I would not say them, because they were for my figures and against his, yet it could not be denied that his were right. To save something out of this, I growled at him, I think, sir, you owe me an explanation as to why you have chosen publicly to humiliate me. I didn't humiliate you. Those figures humiliated you, and they're your figures, he said, and shrugged. I glanced at Potter and England. They were grinning broadly. I looked up suddenly and caught the CG's flat gray stare. They're your figures, she murmured, and anyone hearing her would swear she knew for certain that I had copied them from somebody else's work. There was such a flame of insistence burning up in me that they were so my figures that I could barely contain it. But contain it I did. They were not figures I was anxious to claim at the moment. I was very confused. I slumped down in my chair. You're next, Mr. Potter. I'm sorry to have to inform you that although in theory the barrier does yield under the stress of a magnetic field such as you describe, it would take a generator somewhat larger than this ship to supply it. The affected area would be just about what you said, a square centimeter. And finally, it wouldn't be a hole in the barrier, but what you might call a replacement patch. In other words, the affected area will, when surrounded by the so-called barrier skin, act precisely like part of that skin in all respects. Potter put his hobby finger out for inspection and was so distressed he forgot to look at it. Are you sure? That's what happened the last 7 times it was tried. Potter made a wordless sound, a sort of moan or sigh. I did not feel like grinning at him as he had at me. England did not grin either, because I think he realized what was coming. He just sat there wondering how it would come. It came at Donato first. Mr. Donato? Yes, sir, Captain. You propose a 2-piece missile. You seem to forget, as many another has before you, that the barrier offers no resistance to penetration, and therefore needs no complicated hanky-panky to get something inside. In addition, it's unimportant whether or not an object is sensed by the skin and reported to control, or whether it's picked up a minute or hour later by one of the hunting missiles. You've attacked the whole problem with a view to getting something inside, which isn't a problem, and overlooked what to do inside, which is. Oh, Captain, I'm sorry, said Donato, stricken. He burst into a sharp series of barking coughs. There were tears in his eyes. Oh, I'm sorry. Nothing to be sorry about, the captain said. Got it yet, Mr. England? What? Oh, said the missile expert. I guess I was off base about the jamming. Suddenly it seems to me that's so obvious. It must have been tried and it doesn't work. Right, it doesn't. That's because the frequency and amplitude of the control pulses make like purest noise. They're genuinely random. So trying to jam them is like trying to jam FM with an AM signal. You hit it so seldom you might as well not try. What do you mean, random? You can't control anything with random noise. The captain thumbed over his shoulder at the Luana galaxy. They can. There's a synchronous generator in the missiles that reproduces the same random noise, peak by pulse. Once you do that, modulation's no problem. I don't know how they do it. They just do. The Luana can't explain it. The planetoid developed it. England put his head down almost to the table. The same random, he whispered from the very edge of sanity. As if anxious to push him the rest of the way, the captain said cheerfully, Good thinking on that proposal to study the metal content of the missiles, only there isn't any. They're 100% dielectric synthetics. God knows exactly what. The planetoid can transmute, you know. What little circuitry the missiles have is laid out in fluid-filled pipes, capillary coils, things like that. There seems to be some sort of instantaneous transition from solid to liquid and back. The liquid conductors are solid dielectrics again just as soon as they have passed whatever current they're supposed to pass, and that's done in microseconds. Radar transparent, concluded England dolefully. For all practical purposes, agreed the captain. Well, that seems to be that, gentlemen. Just you tell me one thing, I said before I could stop myself. Precisely what in hell are we doing here at all? Precisely what you came to do. The captain picked up his folders. Bloom, I sense that these 4 gentlemen might be happier without an audience, even us. Come on, Virginia. The captain stared out forward, and the monkey in the CG headed aft. We all sat where we were. After a time, England said, Why didn't he tell me he knew so much about missiles? Did you ask him? Snapped Potter. That was the question and answer I had been humbly formulating too. I said, "What did he mean we are here to do what we came to do?" "Maybe he wants us to get oriented is all," said Donato sheepishly. "Get off theory, like field work. If he thinks he's jolting my inspiration, he's crazy," gloomed England. He wiped his wet eyes with the backs of his hands, leaving them still wet. "The jolt I got all right. The inspiration I can't find." "He should have told us before, right at the start. Maybe by now we'd have a whole new set of figures." Donato caught my sharp look and immediately said, "Theories, I mean, friend. I didn't mean to say figures." Somehow that didn't help. "Get out of here, Donato," I said. "Sure, friend, sure," he said, and got out like always, smiling. He went into his room and closed the door. We could hear him coughing. "Like a box you have in your room 10 years, Potter was muttering adenoidally. "It all of a sudden goes boing, and there's a jumping jack." I was going to ask him what he was talking about and then realized he was talking about the captain. I saw his point. Why hadn't he called this meeting weeks ago? "He must like things to look futile," I said. "I'm going back to bed." "Me too," said Potter. I got up. Potter and England stayed where they were. They were going to talk about me. I just didn't care. I dreamed I was walking in a meadow, smelling the sweet, fresh odor of snowdrops, when all of a sudden they grew taller and taller, or I grew smaller and smaller, and I saw that instead of stems, the snowdrops were growing on a sequence of equations. I began to read them off, but they got all twisted and jumbled and started to grab at my feet. I fell and grunted and caught hard at the edges of the bunk and was totally awake. I turned over and looked at the overhead. I felt clear-headed but lethargic. I thought I could still smell the snowdrops. Then I noticed the wine. It was far away but persistent. The lights looked funny. They seemed to be flickering slightly, but when you looked straight at them, they were steady. I didn't like it. It made me feel dizzy. I got up and went out into the corridor. Nobody was around. Then a timid voice said behind me, "Virginia in there?" I jumped and turned. It was the monkey, cringing against the bulkhead. "You think I'm that bad off?" I answered him in disgust, but as I turned away, he leaned forward and peered into my room anyway. I went into the mess hall and knocked on the decanter and, when it steamed, poured coffee. Somewhere in the background, I heard a wistful murmur, and then Potter's shocked voice. "In here? Monkey, didn't they tell you? I like girls." In a moment, he came shuffling in and headed for the coffee. "What time is it, Palmer?" I shrugged. I looked at the clock, but it didn't seem to make any sense to me. "God," said Potter and sniffed noisily. "I feel all disconnected. I got a buzzing in my ears. My eyes, it's sort of flickery." I looked at him curiously, wondering what it must be like to be a man who so readily relates everything around him to himself. "That isn't your flicker. It's ours. Same with the buzz, though I'd call it a sort of whine." He looked very relieved. "You hear it too? What happens here, anyway?" I drank some coffee and looked at the clock again. "What's the matter with that clock?" I demanded. Potter craned to look at it. "Can't be. Can't be." Donato came in, his face scrubbed and shining. "Morning, Palmer. Potter. Well, I wondered which one of us would fall first, and I guess I know now, and who to thunk it." He nodded aft and began coughing. We looked. The monkey was stepping off one foot and onto the other in front of England's door. "You ought to mind your own business, Don." "Oh, sure," said Donato agreeably. "Guess you're right at that." Just then England flung his door open, saw Nils Bloom crouching there, and recoiled with an odd, high squeak. Immediately, he growled in his deepest bass, "Don't hang around me, monk," and pushed past the utility man without a backward glance. We watched, looking past him as he approached. Bloom ducked his head inside England's door, withdrew it, took a step toward us, and stopped, his jaw working silently, his big wrinkled head held a little askew. "But hungry. I'm hungry," England said. "Whatever time is it?" "Clock's busted," Potter suddenly laughed. We all looked at him. "Well," he said, pointing at England, "it's not him either." "You were just saying to Don he ought to mind his own business," I snapped. "I wonder," I thought to myself, "if he knows I cut at him because he picks his cuticles." "What business? What goes?" England demanded. "By holy creepin' Cramden," said Donato to himself. He looked aft at the miserable figure there and forward at the closed door to the wardroom and control. "What do you know?" "He is a very surprising man," I said. "Who? Who, the skipper? What's he done now?" England insisted. "Virginia seems to be missing," said Donato. Hearing her name, Bloom ran 3 steps toward us and then stopped in the mess hall door, looking timidly at our faces, one by one. "Well," said Potter, "rank has its privileges." England blew sharply through his nostrils, expressing a great deal and disposing of the matter. He glanced at the clock. "What did you say is wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with it." We turned abruptly and faced the captain. There was an oddness about him, a set to his jaw, a certain hard something in his eye that hadn't been there at all before. Or maybe it had, there at the table this morning. Was that this morning? What the clock said just made no sense at all. I looked at the captain and past him, through his open door, through the wardroom with his neat bunk at the side, on forward to the control console and observation blister. There wasn't anybody up there. From the other doorway, the utility monkey whispered, "Sir?" "Something the matter with the lights, Captain," Donato said. "It's all right," said the captain shortly. He went to the mess hall peeper and switched it on. He dialed for starboard view and stepped back. We crowded around it. Everything looked about the same out there, the wide vein of jewels straggling across the sky, then the unrelieved black. "Show you something," said the captain. He moved the controls and the view zoomed in toward the stars. At close to peak magnification, he switched to the fine-tuning and got the crosshairs where he wanted them. Know what that is? It was a ball, shiny, golden. It was impossible to say how big. Then I heard England gasp. "I've seen that before. Pictures. That's the barrier control, the planetoid." "So close?" I asked. "Just because the barrier is a sphere," said the captain. "Everyone assumes the control has to be in the center. Well, it isn't. It's right here at the edge, and heaven help anything that goes in there in a rush trying to converge on the center." "Sir?" came the whisper. "Now, look," said the captain, winding the zoom handle again. The view backed away from the golden sphere until it was almost lost. Suddenly the screen filled with a flat-topped, streamlined... "A pod! A ship's pod!" said England. The captain stepped back a pace and watched the pod with glowing eyes. His hands were pressed tight together and some great suppressed excitement yearned in him to burst free. We looked from him to the peeper. Under his breath, the captain said, "Get him. Go get him." "Sir?" "Shut up, monk." "That pod's inside the barrier," somebody said. Me, I think. "Look! Look there!" It was like a segment of ivory knitting needle. It was turning slowly, end over end. It approached the pod slowly, high, passed close by, and drifted out of the picture. "A missile," A big one. My God, what's happened? Gasped Donato. The barrier's down, said the captain, as if he couldn't hold the words inside any longer. It's down, you see. It's gone, and the missiles are all dead. Sir? Oh, Captain, I can't find Virginia. Where's Virginia, Captain? You're looking at her, Bloom. You're looking right at her, said the captain, his eyes fixed on the screen. Something hit us, scattered us. For a moment, the mess hall was a swirl of grunts and outraged yells, and then the utility monkey had tumbled us aside and was standing in front of the peeper, one hand on each side frame. He seemed a half-head taller, all at once, and his one hairy arm, where it passed close by me, had cords on it I hadn't known about before. His head was a lion's head. Suddenly he barked, "What did you do? What did you do?" He was talking to the captain, who kept looking over Bloom's shoulder at the picture and was laughing softly. Then the monkey whirled from the screen, turning as if to turn was to tear something, and he faced the captain and said again, "What did you do? What did you do with Virginia?" The captain stopped laughing altogether and was a captain duty talking to a utility monkey. I gave her orders, and I put her in that pod and sent her on her way. Any objections, mister? Bloom's eyes began to protrude. Honestly, you could see them press outward. His mouth opened slowly, and a dribble suddenly scored the corner of the mouth and down the side of the chin. The hands came up, clawed, half grasping. The nostrils trembled, and then he screamed so loud, so close to us, it was like a big dazzling light flashing to blind us. We reared back from that scream, pawing at it. Next thing was Bloom, crouched over and peering ahead as he ran, trying to go somewhere, not knowing how. He ran crazily to the airlock hatch and hit it with his fists, and turned with his back to it and screamed again, "You send me, you hear? You send me with Virginia. You hear me, Captain?" Donato strolled over toward him and, smiling, said the stupidest thing I ever heard, squirted into a violent silence. "Oh, come on, monkey, let's all be chums." Blum screamed again, and Donato didn't wait to get turned around. He ran straight backward until he hit me, and I caught him and held him up so he didn't fall. "Captain, sir," Donato said, squinching his head around as he dangled from my hands. "He won't mind me at all, Captain." "Get to your quarters, Bloom," said the captain from way back in his throat. "You bring her back or you send me out with her. One," slavered Bloom. "You hear me?" "Get to your quarters." Bloom put up his claws. He began walking toward the captain, chewing on his own mouth parts, and his eyes were crazy. The captain bent a little low and put his arms out a little from his sides and moved very slowly toward Bloom. We all got back out of the way. Bloom said, "Now, you hear me?" he said, very softly, and leaped. The captain stepped aside and hit him. I thought it was on the head, but England told me later it was on the side of the neck, toward the back. The monkey was in midair when the captain hit him, and he went right down on the deck on his face, and he didn't put out his hands to stop himself, and he didn't move. We all looked at him and then at each other. "Take him to his quarters," said the captain. His voice startled me because it wasn't where I thought it was, standing by the sprawled-out monkey. He was already across the room staring into the peeper. For him, the thing was finished. Probably his heart wasn't quick anymore. He was back with his work, his job. The rest of us had poundings in the side of our necks, and we didn't know what to do. Go on. Get him out of here. You, Palmer, you're the biggest." I was going to splutter, but I held on tight to it, and didn't. I said, "See here, I don't have to—" From back in his throat, like before, the captain spoke to me. It was a different thing, being the one he spoke to like that and not watching somebody else get it. He said, "You see here. You do have to. Whatever I say, you have to. Not only you, Palmer, but all four of you clowns. The party's over and the work's done, and from now on out you mind me and think first of what I want. At all times. Is that clear, mister? I said, loud, Well, I... And the skipper ripped his eyes away from the screen, almost like Bloom, tearing something, and looked at me. So I picked up the monkey's shoulders and dragged him back to his cabin. It was just like ours, only he didn't have quite so much stuff lying around, or anyway, what there was in square stacks. I tumbled him into the bunk and closed the door because that was the only clear place to lean back against, and I leaned on it and tried to get my breath back. The monkey started to make a scratchy sound in the rear of his throat. I looked down at him. His head was twisted to one side. It was jammed against the pillow. His eyes were open. "Cut that out, monk!" He went right on doing it. "That noise! Cut it out, hear me? I said, you hear me, mister?" That mister didn't sound a bit like the skipper's. I was embarrassed. The monkey's eyes stayed open, and I realized he wasn't blinking them. He wasn't seeing out of them. I couldn't stand that breathing noise, so finally I straightened out his head and put the pillow under it. He stopped the noise right away. He closed his eyes. I still couldn't get my breath. He had blood on his face. Maybe that was it. He didn't open his eyes, but he began to talk very fast, very soft. It was like being too far away from someone to understand what was being said, and then it was like coming closer. All she had to do was let herself, and she couldn't do it. She couldn't just stop fighting and believe. It was like she'd die if she believed anything. She wanted to, more than anything she wanted to, but it was like someone told her, if you believe in anything, you'll die. He opened his eyes suddenly and saw me and closed them again. Palmer, you saw it your own self. The time she cried. All that time, all those weeks, those gray eyes still and hiding whatever it was she had inside her, and me begging her and begging, Virginia, oh, Virginia, I don't care what you think of me. I wouldn't want you to love me, Virginia, but only believe me. You can so be loved. You're worth loving. I love you. I do, Virginia. Just you believe that once, because it's true. And after that, you'll be able to believe other things, little ones at first. I'll help you with them, and I'll always tell you the truth. I said, don't love me, Virginia, or think about it at all. I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave me anything like that. I said, just trust me is all I want, so you can ask me what's the truth, and I'll tell you. But believe I love you. I'm not much, Virginia, so I guess that's not too much to start on. Believe I love you, Virginia. Will you just do that? And she... He lay with his eyes open for a long time, and I thought he was unconscious again. But then he blinked his eyes and went on. She cried, all at once, all over, and she said, Monkey, you're tearing me up, can't you see? I want to believe you. I want to believe you more than anything in the world, but I can't. I don't know how. I'm not supposed to. I'm not allowed. That's what she said. And she cried again and said, but I want to believe you, Monkey. You just don't know how much I want to believe that. Only nothing is what it looks like. Nothing is what it's supposed to be. No one really wants what they say they want. I can't believe them, and I can't believe you. She said, suppose I believed you, and then the day came when things were all straight and true, and they let you see everything. And suppose I found out then that everything you said wasn't so. Found out, maybe, there was no you at all, Monkey. What about that? I couldn't stand that. I don't dare believe you, because I want to. If I don't believe anything about anything or anyone, then if things get all true, I can start there and be all right without losing anything. And she cried some more, and then you, Palmer, you came in, and in a second she was back inside her flat gray eyes, so she didn't believe me, and that's why. I couldn't get my breath. Bloom couldn't get his breath. I leaned on the door, and he lay on the bed, and we panted. "There was a difference," he whispered, chasing some thought he was having. "She had a way of making you doubt anything you said. I told her my mother could cook. She said, 'Your mother could cook,' in that flat way, you know. I had to think and wonder if my mother really could. That's what I mean. But I said to her, 'Virginia, you know, I love you.' And she said, 'You love me,' in that same way, like who ever heard of such a thing? But what I'm trying to say, that didn't touch me when she did that, when I said I love you. I looked into how I felt, and I felt the same no matter what she said. So about that, there was a difference. That's how it was all right to say, 'Believe me. Believe me about that.' I knew that things could change. I knew that almost anything I told her could be wrong some way, but not that. She could trust me with that, and she wanted to. At least I got that." I leaned against the door, feeling embarrassed, and then I could turn it to anger. I said, "You're stupid, monkey, you know? Your crew, she's CG. She couldn't stop you. Why didn't you just go right ahead? That's what she's aboard for." But that didn't make him angry. He looked up at the ceiling and said quietly, "Yeah, she said that too. She said, 'You don't know what you want, monkey,' she said. She said, 'This is what you want, so go ahead, only stop talking about it.' I said no. I said there could be a time. I hadn't thought about it yet. I wanted something else first. I wanted her to believe me. She said I was crazy and to keep away from her then, but after, well, you saw it, Palmer. After she said she wanted to believe me more than anything." He was quiet at last, breathing easily, thinking about something to smile at. I spoke to him, but he didn't answer. He was asleep, I guess. I opened the door quietly and closed it on him and went back to the mess hall. They were all there by the peeper, watching. I said, "He's asleep now, but there's going to be particular hell to pay when he wakes up and really understands she isn't here." The skipper looked away from the screen at me and then back again. He wouldn't spit on the mess hall deck, but he might as well, the way his face looked. He couldn't worry about that monkey. I asked Potter, "What goes?" Potter said, "Whether to get mad or glad, I don't know. You specialist, Palmer, you're a clown. And England, Donato, me too. Virginia, she was the specialist all along. She was the one this whole thing is for. How much farther?" he called out. "A few meters," said Donato, absorbed. I looked at the peeper. The ship's pod, that long, false underbelly we'd hauled all the way from the Earth worlds, it was drifting in close to that golden ball. That ball, I could see now, it was big as a super ship if you could roll a super ship into a ball. It was big as some moons. There were pale sticks drifting all over, dozens of them. "Dead missiles, you see," said Potter, watching the screen. "All dead. Every single cold fusion power plant and explosive in 1,000 kilometers is dead. Maybe more. Ours too." "Ours? That hum, that flicker? We're not tapping a cold fusion plant now, Palmer. We're taking off a steam turbine, water superheated by a parabolic mirror from that sun yonder. Steam turbine take us home?" "Stupid!" Donato chimed in. It was weird. Everybody talking whispery, as if loud noises would spoil something in the peeper. Nobody looked at anybody to talk, just kept watching the peeper, some of them moving the mouth all to one side to talk to one, to the other side to talk to someone else. Donato said, "Little turbine wouldn't move this can half a length." "It's all right," England said. "What she's doing, she's going in there to leech onto that planetoid. First, there's a catalyst that will crumble a pit in the armor. because a bomb'll hardly scratch it. Then, when the skin's thin enough, she's got a bomb in there. It goes off and no more barrier. He said the barrier's gone. Sure, she damped it. She's holding it dead. If she let it go, bango, back comes the barrier and all those missiles come to life. What's this damped, holding it dead, letting go? What is all this? I was getting impatient. The skipper saw fit to say something. We call it the D field because... He was quiet a long time. Because that way it sounds like something we know about, can know about. He flicked a quick glance at all of us as if somebody was going to laugh. Nobody was going to laugh. What it is, said the skipper, hating to say it, it's doubt. A field of doubt. I mean, well, doubt, that's all. Nobody said anything. Doubt, all right, but doubt has a way of getting invisible after a captain makes all those loud captain noises like he did. I imagine he knew that. None of it was our business, not anymore, but he didn't want to be doubted, not even by us specialists, us clowns. He said, what we did, we found Virginia trying to commit suicide. She had this doubt thing on her back, naturally. She didn't want to go on because she had nothing she could believe in, or just plain believe. Well, we took her and gave her some treatments. I'm a skipper, I don't know the details. Anyway, she came out of it with what she had when she went in, but more so. Much more. You all felt it. Don't tell me you didn't. She could make a man doubt his own name. I said, yeah, only realizing when I heard it that I'd said it aloud. Captain Steve watched the screen for a while and said under his breath, that's right, atta girl. And then to us, it was a tricky problem, given that a concentrated disbelief in things could have an effect like this, just for the sake of argument. If you want someone to stop a big power plant from a great distance with this faculty, how do you transport that someone in a ship powered with the same type of plant? If it was a machine now, said England, I'd say assemble it only when you wanted to use it. That's the way they did with the first fission bombs, said Donato knowledgeably. They didn't put it together until it was due to blow. They blew it by putting it together. But doing that with a person? Now, you have the idea. You can't disbelieve in anything until you know what it is, or at least what people think it is. I can't believe or disbelieve that pupe is the word for godmother in High Martian. I just don't know. Well, Virginia didn't know one way or another about a cold fusion plant, though I swear ours gasped a time or two on the way out. She has a large amount of control over it. England said with sudden impatience, Excuse me, Captain, but the only reason I can stand here talking about this is I see it working. Let me tell you then. The cold fusion plant is a Luane idea. It's real simple-minded. Anybody can understand it once it's explained to them. Everything was set up when we came out here, including you four, the crackpot experts who knew more than people who've been in this all their lives. But as far as she was concerned, you were experts right up to the time I set you up and knocked you down. Factorial sigma and the square centimeter magnetic field. Ha! She doubted you were experts when she first saw you, just because she doubted everything. When she saw what I did to you, she felt she was right to doubt. She reached a sort of peak of disbelief. My God, didn't you feel it? Look there, she's leached down. Now the catalyst will be working on the armor. It won't be long now. I still don't see how just plain disbelief can shut down power plants, I argued. Not power plants, just cold fusion plants. Well, let me tell you and you'll understand. I put a shot of sleep gas in your ventilators and got you all out of the way. Then, snowdrops, I said, remembering. Then I put her in the pod and told her to ride it. That's all. Except I armed her. Like you arm a bomb, you see? I told her what a cold fusion plant is. She didn't care one way or the other, mind, but she listened while I explained it to her, all the parts. Then I gave her a paper and told her this is exactly what happens. I told her to read it as soon as the red light on the panel went on, which would be when she was clear of the ship. "Read what?" somebody asked after it got too quiet. It was a long wait, watching that pod leached to the planetoid and nothing happening but white sticks drifting, rocks, bit of stuff the planetoid had pulled in and hadn't been able to eat. "Read what?" the captain finally repeated. "The cold fusion formula, that's all. Written out in words of one cylinder. When hydrogen 1 and hydrogen 2 are in the presence of mu mesons, they fuse into helium 3 with an energy yield in electron volts of 5.4 times 10 to the 5th power. That's what was on the paper. She knew, piece by each, what the parts were, what mu mesons and helium 3 are, and what is meant by that many electron volts. She had all that buried deep in her before we left the Earth worlds. She'd had no occasion to put them together, that's all. And here I come, saying, on paper, this gadget does exactly such and such. Well, she just out and out doesn't believe it. That would make no never mind to a turbine or a power drill, but when you get into subatomic particles, clouds of them, involved in a catalysis, untouched in the long run, but I imagine pretty edgy, and you slam them with this thing, whatever it is she has. Suddenly impatient, he rapped, "Who am I trying to convince? It works, you see." I said, "Get off my foot, monk," and went on watching the screen. I don't think anyone else noticed the utility man. I hardly did myself. "Hey," Donato said suddenly, "our generators are out, right? How do we get out of here?" "When the bomb blows. No more D field. Simple." England barked just as suddenly, "And what about all those missiles with the damper gone? They shoot off in every—" "Dry up, clown," said the skipper, "and keep your panic to yourself. Every one of those missiles is triggered from one place and one place only. That planetoid. How do you think they were kept inside the barrier and off the Luanae Earths all this time? Who cares if they get their power and explosives again? There'll be nobody in the driver's seat anymore. Now shut up. It ought to blow pretty quick." "Blow how? If it's right in the middle of the, damping field—" "I said shut up. That isn't a cold fusion bomb. It's a hairy old thermonuclear that doesn't give a damn what anybody believes." "What is it? What's going to happen? What's out there? Where—" "Go on back to bed, monk," I said out of the side of my mouth, watching the screen. I meant it to sound kind. He'd had a bad time, but it didn't come out kind. I guess I'll never get used to talking to them. It let go. Oh, my God. Captain Steve was wrong. There was triggering somewhere in some part of that split second of hell, because all the missiles went too. They didn't fly. They didn't hunt. The warheads went. It took a long time for our eyes to come back. The peeper screen was gone for good. The turbine moaned down and down the scale and stopped. The lights stopped, that annoying side of the eye flicker. "We got to go out and get Virginia," was the first complete sentence anyone said. Somebody laughed. Not a funny laugh. England's voice was harsh. "Don't be stupider than you have to be, monkey. Don't you see we're back on our cold fusion plant?" "That makes no difference to him," I told England. "He wasn't around when the skipper explained." "Who wasn't around?" barked the captain. "Damn it, Bloom, nobody told you to leave your quarters. You're confined, you understand that? You, Palmer, can't I trust you to—" "Wait!" The scream was almost more than a man could take. It was almost like that flare of light. The monkey stood there in the middle of the mess hall, going mad again. "Wait, wait, wait! I got to know. You all know. I don't. What happened?" "Come on, Bloom," I said quickly. I was afraid of him, but I think I was more afraid of the captain. He had a look on his face I never want to see any more. He brought the face close to Bloom and said, "You want to know? Well, okay, and I don't see why I should waste time or pity on a goddamn monkey. That bomb knocked off the planetoid and the barrier, which is what we came here for, and it knocked off your Virginia, because that's what she was sent out for, okay?" "What you want to kill her for?" Bloom whispered. "You wouldn't happen to know any other way to bring back our power plant, now would you?" snarled the captain. I tried to explain it to the utility monkey. "She didn't believe the plant could work, Bloom, so it couldn't work." "I could make her believe. I could. We looked at him, the big tilted head, the trembling nostrils. He wasn't going to get crazy mad after all. He was going into something else. It scared me more than his going crazy mad would. He said, "It was you, wasn't it? Fixed it so she wouldn't believe anything." "She had a head start," said the skipper, and turned his back. "Come on, Potter, Donato. You're crew now, like it or not. Let's get this can the hell home. We got news for the people." "I never thought human beings could be like that," Bloom said very quietly. "I never believed they could." "Get to bed, Monk," I said, and before I could stop myself, I begged him, "Please, please, Bloom, get out of his way." He looked up into my face for a long time. Suddenly he said, "All right, Palmer." Then he just left. I felt a lot better. Does you good to know you can handle people. "Bunk in, men. We jump in 5 minutes. The captain went forward to check his controls. "Well, don't stand there," I barked at them. "Bunk in, men." "You know what, Palmer? You're a jerk," Donato told me. Then we all bunked down. 4 minutes went by. 5. I heard the whir of machinery. The lights went out. The whir was a moan, then a whine. The light came on dim, then bright, and flickering at the edges of the eyes. I didn't figure it was any of my business, so I just lay there and waited. Pretty soon, the captain came back. He leaned against my cabin door and looked at me. "Something the matter?" I wanted to know, trying to sound intelligent. "Power plant's out is all." "Oh," I said. What's wrong with it?" He heaved a slow sigh. "Nothing, only it doesn't work." "I guess I'd better get up," I said. "Why?" he asked me and went away. I got up anyway and went and told Donato and Potter in England. They stayed where they were. They didn't like this quiet skipper with the quiet voice and no arguments. "You know, if he can't fix it, we don't go anywhere. The Luanae have no ships and we can't reach any of their planets," England told me. I'd as soon he hadn't. I went to see Bloom for something to do. He had his eyes open without seeing anything, and he was mumbling to himself. I tried to hear. "A little kid. They say you have the same chance as everybody else. You believe them. I'll hold your bag, they say, while you get the tickets. Don't worry, I'll be here when you get back. And you believe them. Got a great job for you, son. Light work, big tips." "Monkey," I said. He looked up at me. "You know what, Palmer? She said if you don't believe anything at all, you lose nothing when it all comes straight at last. It's all come straight for me now. Virginia. I can be safe now, Virginia, not believing. They can't take anything away from you that way. You're so right." He went on talking like that for a long time. I left and walked forward and found the captain. He was in the control room, jiggling a handle back and forth and not looking at it. I said, "Captain, that D-field the girl had. Now, could a person fall into that by himself? I mean, without those Earth worlds, doctors and all?" "You sure you have to come bother me about it?" he asked in a whisper, not looking at me. I backed way off and said, "I think I do. I think the monkey's got a case of the same." "Now that's crazy. He'd have to have a real shock to get into a state like that. The monkey's okay. Beat it. He's mumbling how he doesn't believe in anything." So the captain went aft with me. He watched the utility monkey for a time and then said, "Well, we'll fix it so he doesn't believe one way or another," and hit the man in the bed on the jaw so he slid up and banged his head on the inboard bulkhead. I could hear the monkey breathing, and I could hear the steam turbine on and on. I said, "I guess being unconscious doesn't make any difference to what you believe." "You should know," said the captain. "All right, Palmer, pick him up and bring him along." "Where?" "Shut up." He walked out. I guessed I'd better go along with him. I heaved and grunted the monkey up over my shoulder. I almost fell down with him. The captain was waiting in the corridor. He started to walk when I came out, so I followed him. We went down to pod level and forward to the airlock. Captain Steve began to undog the inner lock. "What you going to do?" I asked him. "Shut up," said the captain. "You fixing to kill this monkey? You want to get home?" "I don't know," I said, and thought about it. The captain flung back the inner door and stood up. He said, "What's your trouble, Palmer?" I said, "I don't think I'm going to let you do this, Captain. There's some other way. You don't have to kill a little utility man. Put him in, Palmer." I stood there with the limp monkey on my shoulder and glared at the captain while he glared back. I don't know how that might have ended. I do, only I'm ashamed to say it. But there was a noise and a voice, and somebody stood up out of the lock. "Well, it's about time," Virginia complained. "You had the inner lock dogged, and I've been lying in there for an hour. I guess I went to sleep. Who's that? What's the matter with Nils?" The captain looked like a man with a cup of flour in the face. "Who told you to leave the pod?" "The Luanae," she said calmly. "Inside my head, like. It was funny. Told me how to get into the flight suit and how to get the gas bottles and strap them all together and use them to jet clear of the pod and that big gold thing. I got a long way away, and then they told me to get back of a big piece of rock floating there. There was a lot of light. They told me when to go again after the pieces stopped flying by. It was easier then. There's a jet unit built right into the suit. Did you know that? The Luanae told me how I was supposed to use it." I got my jaw working and said, "What made you think you could make it go?" "Well, it's the same kind of unit that brought us here, isn't it? You can't help believing your own eyes." At last, the captain moved. Before he could say a word, I slung the monkey down to the deck and pushed him. I bet the captain has been hit in his life and maybe kicked, but I don't believe anyone just up and pushed him in the chest. He sat right down like a child with his legs spraddled out, looking up at me. "Now you just stay there and shut up yourself," I told him. "You're always doing everything with these people the wrong way." Virginia was kneeling beside the monkey. "What is it? What happened to him?" I said, "He's got a bump, that's all. Listen, if you don't mind me asking, do you believe he loves you?" "Oh, yes," she said immediately. "Then I tell you what, you stay right here with him and rock him back and forth a little till his eyes open, here? Then tell him that. Tell him you believe him. That's all." The captain scrambled to his feet and opened his mouth to bellow. I bellowed first. I don't know where it came from, but I believed I could do it, and it was a time to believe things. You get up forward and check your controls. This can's going to take off like a scalded eel if you've let the controls open, and I don't want these folks shaken up. Go on, quick. You're the only one here who knows how to do that. I'm the only one who knows how to do this other, right? Right, I said, and pushed him. He growled at me, but he went right up the ladder. I hunkered down beside those two people and looked them over. I felt fine, very fine. I said, "Virginia, you know what this is? This is the day everything all comes out straight. Right? Right. You're a funny sort of man, Mr. Palmer. A clown, ma'am." I made a face at her and went up the ladder. About the time I reached the top, the ship began to move. I fell right back down again, but they didn't think it was funny. They didn't even seem to see me. I climbed back up quietly and went back to my cabin. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.